Hello everyone, Sigmund here, and today I'm going to be doing something that I've wanted to do for quite some time. People have often asked me, what are my favorite movies of all time? So I've decided to show you guys, but instead of doing a top 10, 20, or whatever list, I've decided to show you guys my favorite movies A through Z. That's right, I'll be showing you guys my favorite movies from each letter of the alphabet, starting with a numeric title. And while I am planning to do a countdown of my favorite films of whatever sometime in the future, I just thought this would be a fun, simple little project to do. So with that said, here are my favorite movies from A through Z, starting with this numeric title. You think that a movie where 90% of it takes place in one room would be very compelling. Well, this is something that 12 Angry Men does quite nicely. And that's all thanks to some phenomenal performances by legendary actors like Henry Fonda and Lee J. Cobbs, great cinematography, and a unique courtroom drama story that makes the characters, and to a further extent the audience, question the evidence that's presented. It's a timeless classic that every lover of film should watch. This was also the first Criterion Blu-ray that I got from my collection. And I gotta say, what a perfect film to start on. Alien might be one of my favorite horror films of all time, apart from Psycho, The Thing, and The Haunting. It has the combination of great practical effects, suspense that will leave you on the edge of your seat, and an awesome female lead in the form of Ellen Ripley. Its sequel, Aliens, would prove to be just as good as its predecessor, and while I personally prefer the first one a little more, I do love both of these films quite equally. I've already talked about this film before when I did my top 20 favorite Disney animated classics video a while back, but what else can I say that I haven't already said? Beauty and the Beast is still one of my favorite Disney movies. With its gorgeous animation, memorable songs, and a great cast of characters, it truly is a tale as old as time, which is the least I can say for its remake. Just to give you all a heads up, this is one of 5 Studio Ghibli films you'll be seeing in this video. I mean, what can I say? I'm a huge fan of their movies. And Castle in the Sky is easily in my top 10, maybe top 5 favorites. An enchanting story with adventure, action, romance, and mystery that I highly recommend to everyone, both children and adults. Drive is one of those movies that the general public weren't all that crazy about when it first came out back in 2011, but it wasn't until upon second viewings they were able to appreciate it more. I, however, was able to enjoy on just the first viewing alone. A very haunting story that presents Ryan Gosling in a way you've never seen him before, playing a character who barely speaks and yet still plays a very compelling individual. Both beautiful and brutal, Drive is a tense drama that I do recommend. Just don't go in expecting Fast and the Furious levels of high-octane action. The Elephant Man was my very first film by David Lynch that I have seen, and what a perfect one to start off on. Based on the real Joseph Merrick, this tale is very eerie and haunting with its black and white cinematography. Both Anthony Hopkins and John Hurt give amazing performances as Frederick Travis and John Merrick. As tough, painful, and depressing this film can be at times, The Elephant Man still manages to be an uplifting story about one man's quest to show the world he is not the monster they view him as. A side note, why has this film not been released on Blu-ray yet? Like, can you see this being in the Criterion Collection? I mean, most of David Lynch's films are already in the collection, like Eraserhead, Mulholland Drive, Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me, and Blue Velvet. Criterion, get on with it already! Like with Beauty and the Beast, I've already talked about this movie before, and like what I said there, this is easily one of the best films, if not the best film, that Walt Disney himself ever made. The way he and his team were able to make beautiful animations sync up with classic music is just mind-boggling. It's an achievement that no animated film nowadays has yet to reach to. Not even its sequel was able to reach to its success. The Fireflies is easily one of the most depressing films out there, but much like Schindler's List, it's another one of those films that everyone has to watch at least once. It's a film that Roger Ebert himself best described as an emotional experience so powerful that it forces a rethinking of animation. It belongs on any list of the greatest war films ever made. This would also have been the first Studio Ghibli film to be directed by the now deceased Isao Takahata. May he rest in peace. I said it once, and I'll say it again. The Hunchback of Notre Dame is easily one of Disney's most underrated animated classics. It deserves a lot more credit than what most people give it, And while I will agree the gargoyles were definitely the worst part, everything else, from the animation, the music, the story, the tone, and the other characters, is just incredible. Like most of Brad Bird's films, The Iron Giant is one of those movies I didn't fully appreciate as a kid, but I now do as an adult. Definitely a unique film from the 90s that tried to go outside the norm of copying the Disney formula and try to be more mature while still being appealing to both kids and adults. I would say this film was underrated, but thanks to the internet and a re-release in 2015, I suppose it no longer is. Yeah, this really shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone. Of all the science fiction movies out there, Jurassic Park may be in my top 5 favorite, with effects that still hold up to this day, memorable characters and dialogue, intense thrills, and very thought-provoking statements about playing around with the forces of God. Something that the sequels would clearly fail to replicate. Here we are, yet another one of Studio Ghibli's masterpieces. Kiki's Delivery Service managed to be a very uplifting story about this young witch, despite being very simplistic. There's no villain, no good versus evil, no big cataclysmic event. It's basically just a slice of life story where the main character happens to be a witch who has a talking cat. And that really is the beauty and charm of this film. Logan might easily be my favorite comic book slash superhero movie, apart from The Dark Knight, of course. The final X-Men film to star Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, he went out in the best way possible. Being incredibly brutal, character-driven, and very emotional, Logan serves as what a perfect comic book movie can be. Mary and Max might easily be in my top 10, if not top 5, favorite animated films, or films in general. A highly emotional tale about a friendship between two pen pals that deals with the themes of loneliness, depression, isolation, and what a person with Asperger's syndrome deals with on a daily basis. As someone who has Asperger's, this is a story that I can relate to. This is a film I highly recommend to everyone except young children, since they probably wouldn't be able to handle or even understand some of the dark themes. Much like Drive, No Country for Old Men is another film that wasn't very well praised by the general public at first, despite being highly praised by critics and film buffs. And a lot of that is due to the ending, which I won't say anything because spoilers. All I could say is that this is easily my favorite film by the Coen brothers, with its high suspense and its great cast like Josh Brolin, Tommy Lee Jones, Woody Harrelson, and of course Javier Bardem as Anton Chigurh. On a side note, I have just started to read the original novel by Cormac McCarthy, the same author who also did The Road, which also got a very good film adaptation. Old Boy is one of those movies that is a lot more disturbing upon its second viewing, and that's mainly due to the twist this film pulls off and the villain's motivation. Let's say, if I ever get around doing a list of my favorite foreign films, Old Boy would rank high on the list. I still need to get around seeing the two other films of this Vengeance trilogy that this film is a part of, being Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance and Lady Vengeance. But from what I understand is, much like the Dollars trilogy and the Cornetto trilogy, there's very little connection between these films apart from sharing the same actors. With very brutal action sequences and disturbing twists, I do highly recommend this Korean hit. Just ignore the Spike Lee remake, whatever you do. Pan's Labyrinth is unlike any fantasy film that I have ever seen. Brought to us by the brilliant Guillermo del Toro, this film is basically a modern Grimm's fairy tale. It's dark, gritty, but also has this charm that I rarely see in most fantasy films. A lot of that comes from the young girl who plays Ophelia and the incredible effects used on the faun, who at times I can't tell is a suit or CGI. Overall, Pan's Labyrinth is very high as one of my favorite movies of all time. Okay, I gotta be kind of honest with y'all. While I personally think this film is a tad overrated, I will say A Quiet Place is still quite an experience. For the first film to be directed by John Krasinski, he did a pretty good job on it. It's a thriller film with a neat concept that, in my opinion, could have been done better, but was still good nonetheless. So why is it my favorite movie that starts with the letter Q? Well, simply because it's the only one I have seen. I haven't seen Quiet Man, Quiz Show, Quartermaster in the Pit, or Quickly Down Under. Maybe if I end up seeing any of those movies, perhaps this spot will change. The Revenant is quite a thrill ride indeed. Wonderful cinematography, a wonderful performance by Leonardo DiCaprio as usual, and thankfully winning the award for Best Actor for once. and some of the best CGI I've seen in recent years. It is a little slow paced at parts, since the majority of the film is DiCaprio trying to survive the cold elements after his men abandon him, but it still has some intense action, particularly in the beginning and the end. It's also the first film I've seen by Alejandro González Iñárritu, so I'll definitely have to check out his other films, which, considering there's only 5 others, that shouldn't be too hard. Do I really need to say anything? I mean, it's Spirited Away. Not only is this considered to be one of the greatest animated films of all time, but it's considered by many as one of the greatest films of all time. And I do firmly believe that. For me and for most people, this is one of those perfect films in that there's practically nothing wrong with it. The animation is gorgeous, the story is pure originality and imagination by Hayao Miyazaki himself, and the characters are all unique and memorable. If you haven't seen Spirited Away, what are you doing with your life? Get on with it! Power might be one of the greatest documentaries I've ever seen. Granted, as of right now, I still have yet to see The Act of Killing, Senna, Won't You Be My Neighbor, They Shall Not Grow Old, The Cove, Showa, and The Kingdom of Dreams and Madness, but if I had seen those before making this video, I still would say Tower's right up there with these others. Based around one of the first mass school shootings in American history, the film combines archival footage, interviews of the survivors, and rotoscope animation to recreate the event of that day and gives a perspective of what the people of that town had to deal with. If you are a fan of historic documentaries, this is a must-watch for you. It's unlike most documentaries I have seen. Although I have heard that Another Day of Life is supposed to be somewhat similar to it, and with G-Kid's recent announcement that it's going to be in theaters this fall, I'm hoping I'll be able to check that out. I don't think I really need to say anything, do I? I mean, Up is considered to be right up there as one of Pixar's best, apart from The Incredibles, WALL-E, Inside Out, Coco, Ratatouille, and of course, the Toy Story trilogy. It has colorful animation, great characters, harrowing adventure and suspense, and some of the most emotional moments Pixar has been able to pull off. And that is saying a lot. Much like Logan, V for Vendetta is another comic book movie that deviates from the norm of most comic book movies. Based on the DC/Vertigo comics of the same name, V for Vendetta is a political thriller with outstanding performances by Natalie Portman and Hugo Weaving, exciting yet brutal action scenes, and some thought-provoking political commentary about vengeance, freedom, and the corruption of government. Even if you're not into politics like myself, this is still a film worth checking, especially if you want something different from the typical superhero formula. We get to the last Studio Ghibli film on the video, as well as the last film by the studio ever made, until Miyazaki's next film that will be coming out in a couple years from now. No other movie, animated or live action, has ever made my heart snap into a million pieces as much as when Marnie was there. Much like how Oldboy is more disturbing upon second viewing due to its twist, Marnie is more sad and depressing upon second viewing due to its twist. All I could say about this film without going into spoilers is that it is beautiful. Beautiful animation, beautiful music, beautiful characters, and a beautiful story about isolation and loneliness that many people can relate to. When Marnie Was There is my favorite Studio Ghibli film after Spirited Away. X-Men Days of Future Past is easily one of the best X-Men films, apart from Logan. It writes the wrongs of X-Men 3 and X-Men Origins, and has a wonderful use of its characters and all-around great performances by Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Jennifer Lawrence, James McAvoy, and Michael Fassbender. No other anime film not made by Studio Ghibli has ever made as much of an impact as Your Name. Brought to us by Makoto Shinkai, this beautiful story manages to combine a unique romance that involves body swapping with a disaster film. On paper, that sounds like it wouldn't work, yet Shinkai managed to pull it off incredibly well. With its gorgeous animation and wonderful two main characters, Your Name has become one of my favorite non-Ghibli anime films. I mean, apart from Wolf Children, Ghost in the Shell, and Akira. And if you're wondering about my thoughts on the upcoming live-action remake by J.J. Abrams, well... No! No! So we end this video off with one of the biggest surprises by Disney in recent years. Could have been a generic kids film about talking animals, Zootopia managed to be something much more than just that. It has a powerful message about prejudice and bigotry, but done in a way that's not completely hand-fisted for the most part, while also having a great cast of characters and some genuinely funny moments. Seriously, I never thought I'd see the day when a Disney film would parody Godfather or Breaking Bad. Overall, Zootopia is one of Disney's best films in recent years, and one I do hope that gets a sequel in the future. So that was my favorite movies A through Z. So what did y'all think? What are your favorite movies A through Z? Comment below, let me know, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Later!